start recording right now. And my name is Rebecca Gibney. I'm the coordinator of professional learning here at Blast Intermediate Unit 17, and I'm very happy to welcome Dr. Nikole Hollin-Sims to our After Hours of PDE. And this is specifically for administrators, or if you have a leadership role. Dr. Nikole Hollin-Sims is an educational consultant for the Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network, PATN, as we know it, at the Harrisburg office, and she currently serves as the co-statewide lead for the Behavior Initiative, as well as an active member of the Multi-Tiered Systems of Support, MTSS initiative. In addition, she is a special advisor for equity for the Pennsylvania Department of Education. Dr. Hollin-Sims is also involved in the state systemic improvement plan with a focus on increasing the graduation rates of students with disabilities. Finally, Dr. Hollin-Sims is a Pennsylvania certified school psychologist with a specific interest in social justice. She has also conducted research around caregivers of children of incarcerated parents and their motivation to engage in family-school partnerships. So we are super excited to have you, and we have you again in a couple of weeks for our educators. So I'm hoping we share that out with our teacher friends as well. But this is an informal question and answer. Let her share what the state's been working on, and then we'll open the floor up. So Nikole, I'm going to hand it over to you, and go ahead.
Well, first off, thank you so much for having me, IU17. I really appreciate this opportunity and to connect with people that if we weren't virtual, I probably wouldn't get to see as often as I would like. So just thank you for taking the time out of your afternoon to join me. As Rebecca mentioned, I support the Department of Education primarily around equitable practices in the K-12 space. There's a lot of work that's taking place at our higher ed level, and my counterpart to that work is Dr. Donna Marie Cole-Malott. And so if you had any interest, I know there were a few people that were talking about pre-service. There's some work that's happening in Pennsylvania related to diversifying our teacher pipeline called Aspiring to Educate. So that's something we're really excited about. The work that I've been doing has primarily been in support of the intermediate units across the Commonwealth. Every intermediate unit has an equity point of contact, and James happens to be the equity point of contact for IU17. And so again, that role is really critical because we're able to connect with schools across the various regions and ensure that equity is something that is at the forefront of the discussion of the practices that need to be in place so that all students can receive their best educational experience. So one of the things that came out of the work was the creation of the PDE Equitable Practices Hub. And if you've not seen it, I do want to just briefly highlight it for you, and also then get any questions or have a thought partner around anything that you might be experiencing in the time that we have together. So very quickly, I'm going to put that link in the chat and then share my screen to navigate the space. If there are questions in the meantime, though, I am more than open to them. All right, you should see the link in the chat now.
I see it.
Perfect, okay. And I'm going to go ahead and share screen. All right, so this work, again, was really out of a need that we saw in the field to create a one-stop shop for everything that is related to equity. And there's so much that's out there that we thought it was important to really vet those things that really could speak to how to implement equitable practices across the board. So we thought it was important to begin this effort by just saying, what is equity? What we're finding across the Commonwealth and even nationally is that there's a lack of common language around what equity truly can look like and sound like and feel like. And in particular, what I hear when I'm out in the field is, you talk about equity, but that's for urban districts only, or that's just for suburban districts, or rural districts who say, you don't talk about us at all. And so when we hear that, we have to be cognizant that equity really is appropriate for all of those varying demographics. And sometimes the focus does go in a certain direction, but it's important for us to consistently think about all. And so as we do that, we talk about the definition of equity, And it's right here in the middle that just says that every student has access to the educational resources and rigor they need at the right moment across their education in all of these categories. So the fact that all of those categories are there really speak to the fact that equity can't live in just one space. It's dynamic. It has to be the fabric of everything that we do. And so the purpose of the hub was, again, to create a one-stop shop and a really coherent collection of resources. How it's organized is in pillars. So the pillars of practice are what we've prescribed from the department lens on how a district or a school can embark on the equity journey. General equity practices, which are big, looming, systemic practices. Self-awareness, which talks about unpacking who you are, focusing on bias, privileges, power, things that we may not recognize are a part of us and show up to other people, or even how they show up to us. Data practices, we can focus on perception data like survey data that looks at climate. We can talk about disproportionality and how certain groups of students may be at a disadvantage or receiving advantages that others are not. The importance of family and community engagement, how they have to shape and mold equitable practices, because the only way to be equitable is to know if we are being responsive to them. And then academic equity, which is, to me, the biggest one. That's about engagement, instruction, access, opportunity. It's really, really deep. And then disciplinary equity speaks to disproportionality in suspension, expulsion, restraint, even school climate, and how to make climates more positive and accepting. And so it's also organized in what we're calling spheres. And if you're familiar with the Spheres of Influence by Joyce Epstein, she talks about the student being at the center of our world in particular, and then there's outside rings that support that student. And so the spheres that we've designated are district school, which is the very large macro system, if you will, then the classroom, so what can teachers do in particular, and then at the core is the individual, whether that's the student, teacher, psychologist, principal, whomever. How are you individually implementing equitable practices, and how can you do that? And so before you begin is the next section. And this does not mean that you have to do this part before you can dive into the hub. It's recommended so that you as a system with your team can really evaluate where you are in the equity process, where your strengths are, where your needs are. And this is an equity audit tool that comes from the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium. For sake of time, I'm not going to open this and take us through it, but just know that it's there. And when you're going through it, there's a companion action planning guide that also can be done in tandem to figure out where your strengths are, where your needs are, and how they align to the pillars. And so you can prioritize which pillars you need to spend a little bit more time around. So as you scroll down, you're now at the pillars section. And so let's say as a team, we've completed the audit tool. We've prioritized where our needs are, and we're finding that our needs are in data practices. We have data, but we don't really know what to do with it. We don't really know how to disaggregate it, all of that. So we'll go to data practices. When we click there, there's a description of what data practices mean in an equity space, and then it's broken down into the 3 spheres. So for the sake of today, I'm going to go to district school. So from a district lens or a school lens, as we scroll down, it's broken down into the 4 types of multiple measures that comes from Victoria Bernhardt, which are demographics, perceptions, school processes, and student learning. And so each one is defined for you, but then it provides you with the specific data sources that you could potentially use that are aligned to that particular multiple measure. And so this was designated to really help operationalize how data practices could be done, and also some skill development on how to evaluate that data through an equitable lens. And so I know I gave you a drive-by on the hub, but I just wanted to really take you through it. You can spend as much time. Some people have told me they've gone down rabbit holes, which was not the purpose, but easily you can get sucked into it and really get some great resources out of it. And as I said, these have been vetted by our intermediate unit partners as being the best at this time. We're going to refresh the hub every quarter. So this month in particular, we'll be adding new resources that are submitted to us. And so it will constantly be an ever evolving space, but also a place where we hope that you can find a lot of utility. So at this point, I'm going to stop share and see if there are questions or just having the opportunity to thought partner.
Dr. Sims, thank you so much for sharing all of these resources with us as we're beginning to dive into each of these pillars, each of these areas. I know, like with our IU so far, we've been in discussion as far as with our on continuing training as well in our meetings and that. So there's more that we're learning throughout this process, and even just going through just even the background at this point. Just even speaking to a few teachers about equity, and they're asking like, what exactly is it? So it's like even just getting back to the basics and starting to put two and two together. And like for one of our online learning hubs with Becky, I did a short video, just a little bit of a background behind it. There'll be another session coming up soon where we will be touching more upon the family and community engagement as well. So we're starting to, like I said, continue to dive in these areas, but like I said, it's just so thankful for that you're here with us and that all of you are on with us today. So if there's any other additional questions, you know, it's a great time to ask, just share.
Nikole, when you refresh the page, the quarterly, are you going to do a blast? I mean, I'm sure it'll be on social media, but I'm sure you'll share it with the equity hubs, and then we'll share it out to curriculum coordinators. But is there any kind of like listserv that we could join to like an equity? How's that process going to happen?
Great question. So you're right. Social media is my MO. It's where I think I get the biggest bang for my buck for people to see what we're putting out. There is a listserv that I do hold that includes the equity points of contact, but I see my really good friend Alexis Wirtz is on the call. She's a principal in Dauphin County, but she's on the listserv with me. So if there are any of you that wish to join it, I send out weekly fill-ups with different resources. So if you would like to be a part of that, if you could just send me your email, I'm very happy to add you to that.
Yeah, those are fantastic. Yes. I love them.
Every Friday, there's a lot of great resources. Like I said, just to print out and kind of read, like I said, with a cup of coffee or something, and just to kind of to touch base on those. But it's covering a lot of the different topic areas, and I think even the 1 week you covered in even just about the election.
Yes.
Too. So.
Yeah. So that's been interesting. The work, my part around the Department of Ed and supporting equity actually started post 2016 election. So I just feel like a connection to these election kind of aftershocks, if you will, of what we go through as a nation, but also in our Commonwealth, in our schools, on how to talk about the election, how to get our students to have civil discourse around the election. And it's okay to have opposing views, but how do you constructively have conversations together about it? So yeah, a lot of those resources will be in the refresh coming this month. But in the meantime, before the refresh, the fill-ups kind of fill you up in the meantime. So yeah, those things I really enjoy putting out the fill-ups, and please, if you are interested, I'm happy to add you to the list.
I just want to shout out those fill-ups. I know like the equity pillars, it's huge. You know, we did the MAC audit, and, you know, it helps to narrow, but it's not narrow enough. You know, there's so much to do. So I think that in my weekly updates to my staff, I'm always putting something like, we're learning together. What are we learning together? So I'm using those equity fill-up emails like to find like a good snip for my staff. What's a quick article to read? You know, can't be too long or they won't read it. But it's good just to keep it like, this is something we're learning together. It's on the forefront. So if you're not on that list, you need to get on it. Super appreciate that, Dr. Hollin.
I think even some of the fill-ups have included some videos as well. So like to watch TED Talks as well. So I'm always about the TED Talks watching. I gain a lot more knowledge about it. And like my motto I always say is, I never feel like I always feel like there's something to learn. Like there's always room to grow. And I'm always like, you know, like always want to learn more and more. So that's where a lot of that will come into play as well. So.
And I've spoken a lot with Dr. Hollin-Sims too about you know, where we are as a region, because
Yes.
equity is such a huge piece. And a lot of times I get frustrated sometimes, and her and I've spoken about this when we have these state calls and we talk about it's all race, it's all race, it's all race. And there's so many other buckets beyond that for equity. And so I think it's important for us to understand that it's not just race, and it's also the socioeconomic, which might be some of the barriers that we're facing. It's the disabilities, it's the, so for us as a region too, or even like the needs assessment, like where do we focus our equity efforts right now? It can be overwhelming to just jump in. I don't know, Nikole, if you want to mention things about like some of our conversations that we've had regarding that.
Sure. So, and thank you so much for bringing that up, because that's part of what I'm finding as resistance from some of our rural districts when we do have discussions about equity. It's like, well, this isn't for me. You're not speaking at all to what my demographics look like. You don't understand, you know, all the nuances that come with being a rural district. And you're correct. I have not worked in a rural district. I only know from people like yourselves that work in the spaces and speak to it so that I have a better understanding. And I think that's a key component of the equity work, is what we call cultural humility. And it's being able to say, I don't know it all. And so I need to learn. And so that term culture sometimes gets conflated, like Rebecca said, gets conflated with race, ethnicity. And culture speaks to exactly that, the culture of your system, the culture of the students that you support. And so when we had our conversation, the context of Black Lives Matter came up. And we were like, you know, that just might be a little hard for our rural districts who have never been accustomed to that type of discussion. For that to be the entry point for equity for them might really stall the work right away. Where we can focus is what's within our demographics. And so culture could be low SES, socioeconomic status. It could be homelessness. It could be gender identity, anything that fits within a category that's different from the majority of students that are sitting in your seats. And I think that's important when we talk about the common language of equity. So if we start disaggregating your data by SES, free and reduced lunch, that's one way to begin an equity conversation that doesn't just rely on, well, let's focus on race right now. Now, one caveat that I will put out is that Remake Learning out in the western part of our state has done a lot of work around race in rural spaces, because even if you don't have a lot of difference in your buildings, there are still people of color in rural spaces. And so how do you navigate supporting them, even if they don't make up a large number of your student body, or even the families that they come from that live in the rural spaces too? So I don't want to neglect the fact that it's still an important conversation, but the entry point for some of our rural districts might not be race, because they won't be able to connect to it as much as they could to a larger group of students that they can support.
Right. And we're going to see some of our districts. I mean, we have Williamsport on right now too. And you guys are going to dabble in a couple of these, right? So whereas we have Southern Tioga all the way up there near the New York border almost. And so like, it's going to, we
actually,
have
yeah. I was going to say, actually, I'm currently working with the Department of Justice to start their Spirit program here.
Nice.
And I'm interested, Nikole, I see you have a link to the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium surveys. I can't find the surveys though, so maybe you could help me locate those.
Sure.
Our take on this has been that exactly what you said, Nikole, that we don't have large groups of students who are different. But what we do have is a substantial group of students in the whole that are different, that are made up by a diverse group of subgroups. And so what we've attempted to do, and our goal, is to give those students who might typically be marginalized or not considered, we want to give them more of a voice and help them to, find ways to be comfortable speaking out about their needs and their feelings and their sense of community within our district and our larger community. We are rural. We are prototypically rural in many ways, but we do feel like we have a strong enough bond with our community to start testing some of the assumptions that aren't necessarily conscious, but very much present.
Right.
And so what we're trying to do is create an overall diversity umbrella to bring students together so that their voice as together is amplified, right? And then allowing within that overall umbrella for breakout committees to address specific issues with the support, hopefully, right, of the other subgroups. I don't know how to better express it, but that's our goal for providing a platform that's, strong enough for our students to feel comfortable expressing, if you have a group of 5 or 6 students, that level of comfort might not be there to really talk about what their needs are. But if you have a larger organization that might be 30, 60, 80 students, then you have a much larger backdrop of support. So I'm very interested in those surveys.
Yeah, I'm going to look for them. But something that resonated with me is the appreciation of wanting to get that student voice. So one of the things that I heard recently is that and I'm going to go board policy for a minute. When we talk about board policy, typically policies are informed by federal government and state government. Equity policies and equity work is driven by families, communities, and students. And so I appreciate you sharing that, Krista, that students now need to be at the forefront of determining what the next processes will be so that it can be more equitable and their voices are valued and heard. And the Spirit program, and if whoever is not familiar with the Spirit program, it comes from the Attorney General's office. Many districts that are a part of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission connect with the Spirit program, and it's student-led. So students they have facilitators, adult facilitators that come in, but the students drive the conversations and they begin to learn about each other, have difficult conversations. They'll probably talk about the election, so you're creating a space where students can create a circle of trust so that they can feel that voice is valued. And so I'm so thankful that you brought that up because it's really, really critical to get that student voice. And as you're talking, if there are more questions, I'm going to try to find those surveys for you.
Oh, great. That would be helpful. Thanks.
Sure.
Yeah, and I also wanted to add too, I'm going to share this, Nikole, because I know Jim is really excited about this. And so am I, the drum major equity
Yes.
for Patton. They're doing the help a charge to become a drum major, the equity and justice. Here's the, I thought I had the link. Hold on. The link is right. I will get it in a second as well. But
I'm looking at it too.
Here, I got it. If you guys are interested in joining, Jim and I will both be on that call. I think it's important, and Jim, myself, and Dr. Nikole Hollin-Sims, we're going to be continuing some of this push with our region through some of the Start Soul process, having some of these more open conversations with everyone that wants to join in on the conversation, synchronous and asynchronous. As we see things coming from the state, everything is involved with equity, no matter our scope of work. So the more we can start helping you guys seamlessly put it all together, that's what we're here for. So if you need any resources, please feel free to reach out. As time is dwindling down, I'm going to share my screen for a quick second and show you. Jim shared about the online learning hub. I think you guys can see my screen right now. Am I correct? Okay,
Yes.
perfect. So as we populate these videos for free for you on Wednesdays and Fridays, you can go down. We have an equity series. As you can see, we only have one video right now, but we've got a lot of other ones. But here's Jim's overview on equity. And then he has a session coming up in a couple of weeks, I think a week or two.
Next week.
So that one will be right here for equity, family and caregiver engagement. Or community engagement.
And the first video, to be honest with you, was basically a lot of like what you covered, Dr. Sims. Just a little bit of a background on it and just start to navigate the website, because when you first look at it, like we were saying, it's like little like at first, if I was looking at the first time, oh my gosh, this is a lot. This is a lot. Where do I even start? And you know what? It's such a great tool, a great guide. Just even serving last year, like with equity, just even working on the vetting and working through it last year, just finding some resources. So it's a nice tool just to start to pick apart. So like next week, I'm going to touch upon the family and community engagement. So it's like maybe like a 20-30 minute video, just starting getting into the basics and give a little more background in that area. So.
Awesome. Okay, well, if you have any other questions, you can hang on here. I'm going to stop the recording. We will be recording